Peer review. It's the cornerstone upon which all knowledge is produced in academia and sending, knowledge forward into the world. But how it works and the process behind it, like most human institutions, is highly flawed and could be improved in a lot of ways. But on the other hand, it has worked well enough so far, and regardless of how well it works, you need to know how to operate within it if you want to academic. And in this video, what I'll be doing is going through an example of one of my own publications and the peer process that my co-author and I went through to achieve a successful result. So that's really it. This video is going to address an example of what it's like to go through the academic process of peer review. Now, you might, as an audience member, never intend to do anything that would be peer reviewed, but it might be interesting for you to understand what the process involves and what it's like to do a successful peer review in order to get published as an academic. I have a PowerPoint, as always, prepared, so I'm going to go ahead and swap over to that. So let me just set that screen up. Yep, that's all good to go. Let's go. Right. Now, as we're starting here, I've got the title up and we can get going from the beginning. The piece that we're going to be looking at was eventually published in Parliamentary Affairs after, I think, 2 rounds of revise and resubmit. The journal Parliamentary Affairs is put out by Oxford Journals, and it's published on behalf of the Hansard Society. So if you're in the UK, you probably are familiar with the Hansard Society. But other than that, it's a very typical kind of academic journal. And the question that I want to, or the presentation I want to give, is how we went through this. How do you get through a peer review process? Is the answer, is a question, and the answer that I'm going to try to give is through this case study of what we did to get published. So you've got your article, it's all ready to go. The next thing, if you've never done this before, is every journal or lots of journals have their own standards on how they want references. Do they want it in endnotes, or do they want it, not references, but like the bibliographic style, and then also footnotes and endnotes, those kinds of information in the article. Should it be going at the bottom of the page, or should it be in an endnote? These things are all determined by the journals themselves. So as an author, you'll need to go and find the journal that you want to submit to and make sure that everything stylistically conforms to what is laid out by the journal itself. And I call it house style. Like every journal has its own little house style. And you have to, sometimes in the bibliography, it'll be initials instead of full first names. And other people will want full first names. And so these are the picky things that end up eating up a lot of your time. So just when you finish your article, you're not even close to being done, because you have to get it into the correct style for the journal. And if it doesn't work out at one journal, chances that you're going to make no changes whatsoever before sending it off to a second journal are probably very, very small. Chances are you're going to have to do a lot of the work of getting it into a different style afterwards. So this is one of the things that's a little bit frustrating when you're getting to the point where you want to send it out and then you have to do all this work. But that is part of the process. So you get your article done, you get it in the house style, you write a letter to the editors of the board when you submit it. And all submissions now are online, and the systems for online submission really take you through step by step, and they have places for uploading something as a letter to the editor, uploading your main article, later on uploading your responses and your figures and your tables. All of this stuff is laid out with the online uploads system. But you'll want to do a little pitch in your letter to the editors. Don't just say, we're submitting this article for you. It's better to kind of summarize at that point what it is that your piece is going to contribute that's new, or the thing it's doing that's, innovative, or whatever it is, the thing that's driving your publication as a new piece of knowledge. That's what you want to summarize for the editors here, because not everything that gets sent to journals gets sent out for review. The first person that you have to get through, the first gatekeeper, is either the editor or the editors or the editorial board, depending on how the journal functions. And if the journal editor, for whatever reason, maybe your piece is too narrow, maybe it's too broad, maybe it just doesn't fit with the aim of the journal, you might get, or it might be bad, that's also a possibility, you'll get a desk reject. And that is the editor saying, we're not going to send this out for a review. And if that happens, you get an email back saying, we've decided not to send your stuff out for review, best of luck, maybe consider a different journal. You know, maybe something more comparative or more regional or specialized or broadly focused, whatever it is that they felt for what, you know, it wasn't going to be a good fit. If you get the desk reject, you just move on. That's it. You figure out another place to send it, and sometimes you look at the feedback too, because maybe it is a journal recommendation where you should send it instead. Maybe they're going to comment on some of the problems within the paper itself. So it's definitely worth going through those and understanding how you can react better to make yourself more successful in the future. If you don't get rejected outright, what the editors will do is they will send it on for review. Ideally, 3 reviewers. I've often seen 2 reviewers. 1 reviewer is not enough, but a minimum of 2 reviewers, ideally 3 reviewers for each article that makes it past the editorial board is quite, you know, that's a pretty typical. Now, when you've been sent out to be reviewed by 2 to 3 reviewers, then, at least in the social sciences, this is typically how it goes. Every discipline will have its own kind of norms and practices, but this is my experience publishing in the social sciences. So I'm going to go through what tends to happen. Well, what you might get rejected. That's a possibility. And in that case, it's the same thing as with a desk reject. You'll read through the comments and look at what the reviewers had to say and figure out what you can do to make the paper better for when you send it on to the next journal. All right. If there's another possibility when you get something back from reviewers, we have the option within the review system to accept a paper as is. That, in my experience, has never happened. I have known no one in my entire academic career who has ever just had their article accepted without changing a word. What I expect now, and what you should come to expect as an academic if you're sending things out, is you're either going to get a rejection or you're going to get a revise and resubmit. And a revise and resubmit is when the reviewer is saying, yeah, this is pretty good, there are some good points here, but this needs to be changed and that needs to be changed, and the third thing, and then the fourth thing, and if you do all of that, then yeah, this is publishable. And each reviewer has their own views of what those things are. So ideally, you know, you'll get all the reviewers who say, please do a revise and resubmit. I've also been involved doing on the review side where 2 of the 3 people will say reject and 1 person will say revise and resubmit. That will then go to the editorial board or the editor who's managing that piece, that particular article, and he or she might make a call depending on whether they think it's a good fit for the journal or whether or not the things have, how it's all going to work out as to whether to send it on. But ideally you get all positives and the most positive you can get is revise and resubmit. If you get a revise and resubmit, then you've got a lot of work ahead of you, because a journal article is never done, in my experience, it's never done when you send it out for review. Sending it out for review is the first stage of the process. And if you think about sending your article out not to be accepted, but for the first round of peer review, then when it comes back with a lot of things that the reviewers want you to change or do or add, then you're not really so surprised because you weren't expecting it to be accepted anyway. Because no one, like I said, in my experience that I've ever heard of, has just had something published, unless it was, I think Albert Einstein, had a letter published in a science journal once when he sketched out a little formula that helped him calculate something to do with the sun, I think, and rings, if I'm remembering. Who is it? The science, Krauss, Lawrence Krauss correctly in that story. But everyone else is going to have to do some work. So if you get a revise and resubmit, that's you've got through the first round, and that's actually the most important. That's really huge. This is the step in the right direction. With the revise and resubmit, you will also get the comments from the reviewers, and depending on how many reviewers there might be 1, 2, or 3. Now, there's something that you should know about the role of the reviewer. And I can say this both as an author and as someone on the review side. The person who's doing the review for you is taking time out of their life. They aren't paid for this. All of the peer review work that's done here is voluntary. They're lending you your time, and their expertise. So the purpose of a reviewer is not to validate you and make you feel better about yourself. That's what you have friends for. That's what you have family for. A reviewer's job is to identify the strengths and weaknesses in your paper so that your paper, your argument is better. That's their job. Now, some people can be really callous and horrible, and some people don't take the job seriously. I've had peer reviews that were 3 lines long, and that I don't think that person did their job very well. But the reviewer is going to set out to tell you what you need to do to improve your paper to get it published. So pay close attention and don't take any of this personally. It's your argument that is being evaluated, not you as a person, because you can always improve your argument. Your arguments can always get better. Even published journal articles could probably be tweaked in some way to make them slightly better. So, just expect that if you get something back for a peer review, the thing that you're really going to be focused on is those things that you could do to improve it, because that's the point of science. And that's the point of peer review, is to make each other better. So the first thing I would say is go ahead and read through. Some people, like this reviewer, will do a little summary of what the article covers. So this reviewer says, this article reports evidence from the qualitative election study of Britain and uses it to shed light on the phenomenon of clegmania and the related phenomenon of voting Liberal Democrats in the 2010 general election. And there's a small description. And then some people do that, some people don't. This person did this, and then they went on to say, although I have some queries and quibbles, my recommendation would be to publish, subject to some revisions. The paper is clearly organized and well written. It sheds light on the nature of party identification, something I shall come on to, and provides a refreshing account of systematic qualitative analysis. A great deal of original empirical research has gone into the paper, which provides a nice example of how to make use of focus groups. The subject is a substantively important one, even if the phenomenon in question occurred some time ago. I think the paper is likely to appeal to the readers of Parliamentary Affairs. Now you see what the reviewer is doing there. Here it's kind of like what you call the crap sandwich, where you say something nice and then you say all the things that are wrong with it, and then you say something nice at the end again. So they're starting off by doing their decision, which is important, to saying my recommendation would be to publish subject to some revisions. When I do reviews personally, I put my decision at the very top, like decision, revise, and resubmit. Decision, major revisions needed. Something along those lines, just because I don't want the person at the other end to have to read to the end of the review to know what's going on. And then they go on to say, my main query, I suppose, relates to, and then the reviewer goes on to start enumerating the things in the original version of the article that he or she thought were not clear or not convincing or could have been done better or needed to be developed more, and it goes through all that. Now, our second reviewer didn't take that tactic of summarizing it. They have their own thing where they say, the first thing I would say about this article is that I have a lot of sympathy with the enterprise of adding some qualitative data. So here, they're not actually writing this bit to us. They're kind of writing it to the editors. So I feel like, this bit of the review is really more for the person at the editorial board than for us. And they talk about the contributions of it, and first contribution is this, second contribution of that, and then they get on to the fourth paragraph, if you can see, depending on the quality of the screen. However, there remain some serious limits on the contribution of this article, both on what it tells us about the 2010 general election and what it tells us about the contributions of qualitative evidence to understand voting behavior in general. I'll address those in reverse order. So they go on to say that authors neglect a crucial question about the validity of self-reports, and goes on to detail these things. So that's read the comments through, and it's when you've put your time and effort into something, it's really difficult to have it criticized. On the other hand, this isn't criticism of you. It's a criticism of an argument you've made in a piece of paper. And you do need to be able to divorce your emotions from that argument, because what both of these reviewers are clearly doing is saying, this is a good piece, but it could be even better. And that's why it got the revise and resubmit. It's pretty good, but it could still be better. And if you go in knowing that your paper is going to be better at the end of the process than it was at the beginning, ideally. And I've never had a situation where something I published is worse after peer review. I've definitely not had that. And I don't know anyone who's ever said they have. But yeah, there's the job here is to produce knowledge. It's not to make you feel better. It's not to stroke your ego. So go ahead, swallow the pride, and just think about it rationally about what arguments are being made. This comes from a site that's like helping with postdoc students or not postdocs, but doctoral students, people doing their PhDs. And this author had some tips for when you read a reviewer's comments and the reviews were not very good, or they were not very nice. Sometimes you can have good comments, but the person is just a jerk. And sometimes you can have people who are jerks who write really bad comments too. I mean, peer review is flawed, but these were the tips that this woman gave, and I will put a link in the description box below to this article to how to deal with a criticism to help you distance yourself, right? She says, after reading through a reviewer's comments for the first time, do nothing. Or rather vent to yourself. Call a sympathetic friend and complain, eat some chocolate or potato chips, watch some bad TV. Allow yourself the freedom to wallow for a moment. Whatever you do, do not respond to your editor or your reviewers immediately. Do not craft a snarky email and press send. And then in parentheses, she writes, don't laugh. That happens enough that Sage, one of the biggest academic publishers, gives this explicit advice on their website. And this is actually really, really important. When it comes to dealing with your reviewers, again, your reviewer has taken time out of his or her day, teaching, whatever else it was that they had going on, and sat down and read your article through once, maybe twice, maybe 3 times, maybe looked up, references, pulled things off the shelf, made a series of arguments, and then wrote that up, made that, and gave it to you. So you might not like the feeling of being criticized, but the last thing you want to do is get an assy tone in your voice or start disrespecting your reviewers or the journal itself, because it's unprofessional. It makes you look very childish and really not committed to the evidence and the findings, but to your own ego and your own feelings. And it's really just not done. So we're going to get onto it, but when it comes to dealing with the reviewers, politeness and acknowledging their points and addressing them directly is key to success. The author goes on to write, read your comments again and again, make notes. Repeat the mantra, this is not about me, this is not about me, this is not about me. And then she talks about in the next 2 parts, she covers how to translate and incorporate reviewer comments. And this is what we did way back, before I'd even saw this website, is go through each reviewer's comments and note all the things that they're saying that you need to deal with for each person. And then when you have both sets of comments or 3 sets of comments, all bullet pointed in terms of what is being done, then you can look to see if there are any commonalities between the 3 critiques or the 2 critiques that you have. And if that's the case, then you can kind of lump them into one and summarize how you've dealt with it to both people at the same time. So you need to, this one is 4 pages long in terms of the critical comments that were made that we needed to address. And then my co-author and I went back and forth, separating out who would do the work. And of course, making changes to the document itself might change some of the way that you present the information, or an implication for your conclusion later on, or maybe you need to rethink something and add a new section. So all of this process of editing and improving and fixing should make the article work better, and it should be clearer by the end of the revise and resubmit. When we'd finished our revise and resubmit and had our draft ready to be submitted, you write another letter to the editorial board saying, hey, here's our revised version. But then, and this is crucial, you need to write your response to the reviewers. And in the response to the reviewers, it is professional courtesy to thank them. Even if you didn't like what they said, even that 3-line guy, you thank your reviewers for their time and their efforts and their expertise. That's just common courtesy. And then you go on to identify exactly what they wanted you to do, and you respond in kind by saying, this is how we took on this criticism, here is the page number in which we deal with it so that the reviewers know precisely how you've changed the article to address each of their concerns. And in this case, this was 15 pages long and almost 8,000 words in terms of the responses. And so we started with reviewer 1, and we took the quote of what they were objecting to or concerned about or what they wanted changed, and then we responded. And then we went on to their next point. And if there was commonality, we would bring in, reviewers 1 and reviewers 2, and then we go to reviewer 2 and deal with his or her points, again, one by one, and citing specifically how we had addressed it, so that when they went back and read the revised piece, they would know that we hadn't missed anything. That we wanted to give them no reason to give us another revise and resubmit. We wanted them to go, okay, yeah, this is fine, accept it. Well, in our case, actually, we didn't get quite that far. We had, oh no, I missed out a page. But we had a second R&R. The person who wrote back basically just had quibbles the second time around. They just said, oh, can you please change that and change this? And we were quite happy to at that point, because over the course of the dialogue, we really came to appreciate the insight and the recommendations that our reviewers made, because we realized at the end of the day, it was a much better article. And actually now it's the most favorite thing I've written. Of all my academic publications, this piece is, I think it works the best. The flow is very nice, and the language, it builds up a story in the way that we're using stories as data to make conclusions about Clegmania. So for me, it's very meta. But yeah, we were actually there are times that you'll see sometimes in journal articles, where the authors will add, we would like to send our grateful thanks to the 2 anonymous reviewers who greatly improved this piece. And I get that now, because a good reviewer can really do a lot to take a piece that you thought was already good and make it even that much better. And that's the point of having peer review and being critiqued. It's so that at the end of the day, you're producing better writing, better results, more accurate knowledge for other people to use. And that's what science is all about. And at the end of the day, as I said, through the process of peer review and listening to other people's criticisms and suggestions of ways that we could improve it, improve our arguments, and basically just make it a better piece of work, it was much better. I mean, it wasn't drastically different. I can show you the originals and the final version if you're that interested to make the comparisons. But at the end of the day, the peer review worked for me in this case. And there are some problems with the system, but generally it can, if people who are participating are open-minded, both on the reviewer side and the author side, and the aim of everyone is to produce the best research possible, the best information possible, the best facts possible. Well, then, just like democracy, it's worse except from everything else that we've tried. Thank you, Winston. And that was really it. Just an example of how to go through that process of getting from your first, sending something out for the first time, your first journal article out, time, how long you can expect, what's a desk reject, what happens if it goes to review. If it goes to review and you get a revise and resubmit, how should you handle it? And my advice is, again, the reviewers at the end of the day will carry the weight of whether or not it gets published. And I've unfortunately known someone who's gone through 3 rounds of revise and resubmit only to be rejected at the end of the 3rd round. So there's no guarantee that if you get an R&R or revise and resubmit that you're going to be published, or second, or the 3rd. There's nothing that makes academics publish something. Even if you try to address all their concerns and you can't, you might end up getting rejected. And in that case, you go out and you have a pint with your friends or whatever you do to blow off steam. And then you decide which version, the original, the first revised version, the second revised version, the 3rd revised version, you send off to the next journal. Because that's what you do. You just, if you think that it's worth publishing, if you believe that there's a finding in there that should be in the world and people should know about, well, then keep sending it out. Find the right place for that piece of research. And the other piece of advice that I was given, I've never been in this situation myself, but someone who is a professor emeritus was talking about his experiences, that sometimes reviewers will ask you to do things and you might feel that it will fundamentally change the nature of your findings, or if they want you to say something that you don't feel comfortable saying, or you don't want your name attached to, or whatever else. And at that point, you need to make a decision. Is it more important that I swallow my pride or swallow my ethics? Well, not ethics, but swallow whatever it is that is making you like not want to accept what they're saying and just get the publication? Or are you going to stand on principle and say back in the R&R, as much as I respect your perspective, I feel that ultimately I have to phrase it in this way or come to this conclusion, and then see what they do. They might decide, well, that's it, you're just not going to get accepted at this journal. They might go, all right, now that you put it that way, fair point. Don't really know. But if you really don't feel like you want to compromise your writing, because at the end of the day, it's your name on it, you have to own it, then put your foot down and find a different journal. So, and the other piece of advice was, if you get something back and it's rejected and you just can't deal with it, maybe put it in a drawer for 4 months or 6 months, take it out again and read it. And if after 6 months, some distance from it, you say, well, yeah, that really wasn't as good as I thought it was. I can't really redeem this. Maybe I'll just move on to another piece of writing. That's one option. Another one is, no, I think this is really good. I think maybe I can take on, fix this and fix that and maybe update this information. But, after 6 months, I still think this is a good piece of writing. Academia takes a really long time. So it's not, you're not going to get your, I think we started in April and we got published like over a year later. So, and that was the online version. The published physical version came out even later than the online version. So, don't sweat the time periods. Things take long periods of time. If 6 months away from a piece will give you the distance you need to make the changes to get it published, then those 6 months are worth it. That is how you academic. If you're interested in reading the piece in Parliamentary Affairs, I'll put a link to that in the description box below. But all that is left to be said after this is that I've been Kristi. You've been awesome. I'll see you guys later.